suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Friday morning, 20 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. That we do come to you live. I do understand that for many majority of our friends are around in and around Europe, it's still 6 a.m. So do bear with us for those for our regulars in and around Europe, football, Real, LFC, Pedri, and every single one of you out there that is a regular on this channel. We are back once again to this time round for the weekend preview to discuss what's to come this weekend. And I want to send my sincere vote of thanks for all of you that did tune in last night and were part of that massive discussion as we went through. We talked Liverpool, we talked Cristiano Ronaldo, we talked the World Cup. Of course, in relation to Cristiano Ronaldo, Russia proposed, parallel World Cup for countries that never qualified for the main event that will be in the USA. We talked about Leandro Trossard, we talked about Mukalo Modric, and things in between there. So thank you so much for being part of that fruitful engagement last night for each of you that managed to catch it. So, like I said, this morning we'll be focusing on the weekend, the Premier League weekend preview for discussion, and of course we'll be looking elsewhere in Europe to see what's to come. In as far as match day 13 of the Premier League is concerned, and more of that. Teams have welcomed some players from injury. Yesterday, there was action in the UEFA Europa League as well as the UEFA Conference League. Nottingham Forest were winners. Crystal Palace were beaten against Strasbourg. Then you had those kinds of results. Aston Villa managed to come through against Young Boys. So, a very, very interesting night for, Unai Emery and things like that. So really, really plenty of positive things that did come through from that side, as you may know it. Anyways, allow me have our audios tested and make sure everything does check out before we proceed any further for purposes of this particular broadcast. And we'll get the conversation going in as far as what's to come from the league, from favorite league. That's the Premier League this weekend, and more or beyond that. So, without wasting any further ado, here is a run of fixtures. Good morning, everyone. For those of you that are just joining us, please kindly consider subscribing to the channel, but also like the broadcast. My name is Robert Kesakos, and I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. That's where I'm streaming live from. If you have any questions for me, do not hesitate to leave them down in the comment section. But do let me know where you're joining us from on this beautiful Friday morning. I believe it is a morning, wherever it is you are, but it is a football channel that you have tuned into. And we are going to be talking about the Premier League weekend that is coming our way, and obviously, among other things. So, leave me a comment down in the comment section. Like I said, without wasting any further ado, here's the run of fixtures that will be coming your way this weekend. There will be no early kickoff, contrary to what we are accustomed to on Saturday, but games kick off at 6 p.m. with 3 games coming our way, with Brentford at home against Burnley. Manchester City will be at home against Leeds United, looking to bounce back from those 2 consecutive defeats against Newcastle and against Bayer Leverkusen in the UEFA Champions League. Sunderland will be at home against FC Bournemouth, while at 8:30 p.m. Everton will welcome Newcastle. Newcastle, fresh from beating Manchester City by 2-1, while subsequently in midweek they did lose to Olympique Marseille in a 2-1 defeat to Newcastle. In the UEFA Champions League. Then Tottenham Hotspur will come in the late kickoff against Fulham in a London derby to complete Saturday, while on Super Sunday, Crystal Palace will entertain Manchester United at the sort of confined squeezed in at Selhurst Park. Aston Villa, the United game will come at 3 p.m. East African time. Aston Villa at 5 minutes past 5 p.m. will be at home against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Nottingham Forest will play at home. That's at the City Stadium against Brighton and Hove Albion. While at the same time, Liverpool will play away to West Ham, and then Chelsea at 7:30 p.m. will be up against Arsenal in the weekend's biggest game, which is another London derby when the Gunners make the trip to Arsenal. So we'll be digesting those fixtures. We'll be looking at them. We'll be giving you our predictions in as far as what our expectations are going to be to come for this particular weekend. Without any particular discrimination, here is my feelings on some of these fixtures. Brentford had built themselves a little bit of momentum. Of course, beating up against teams like West Ham, beating up against teams like Liverpool, losing to Crystal Palace, beating up against Newcastle, but also lost to Brighton the previous weekend in their last outing. So, having won only one in the first 5 fixtures, I thought Keith Andrews had done well to sort of get a bit of balance in that team. They've been giant killers this season. They've beaten up against Man United. They've beaten up against Liverpool. They do with Chelsea 2-2. They sort of gave Manchester City a run for their money, albeit Man City managed to beat them by 1-0. Very soon, just I think next week, in midweek, they'll be playing away to Arsenal and things like that. So, on the other side, in contrast, Burnley over the last 5 fixtures have beaten up against teams like Leeds United by 2-0, have beaten up against Wolverhampton Wanderers by 3-2, lost to Arsenal, lost to Fulham, lost to West Ham, and have lost to Chelsea the last weekend. That means Burnley have lost 3 of their last 5 fixtures. So it's not been an easy go for the newly promoted side of Burnley. So Brentford have been quite impressive at home, and this is a fixture which Brentford have I wouldn't say dominated in the last 4 meetings between the two sides, because that's all there's been in as far as the Premier League is concerned, and both sides have won this fixture twice. With each of them winning their home fixture, and that is where I will stand to say that Brentford will be looking to better their fortunes in as far as this season is concerned, and I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory for Brentford. Then quickly, next will be Manchester City up against Leeds United. Like I told you, Manchester City, I do not know whether Pep Guardiola was too mad at his players for how they played against Newcastle, that he almost changed literally everybody that started against Newcastle and did not feature them in the starting 11 against Bayer Leverkusen. Majority of them came off the bench. They brought Erling Haaland, so this world, the Jeremy Doku, among others. But because Tijan Wenda started in that game, maybe Nico Gonzalez was the only starter from the game over the weekend. James Trafford was in goal. Kushanov was at right back. Ryan Ashnory at left back. You had John Stones alongside was it Nathan Ake in that centre back pairing? So it's the sort of game that I don't know. I don't know whether Pep Guardiola was trying to send a message to his players. Previously, having said that the season had officially begun, well, it hasn't officially begun well for him, because he lost to Newcastle and lost to Bayer Leverkusen in a 2-1 defeat and a 2-0 defeat, respectively. But nonetheless, when you take away that loss from against Newcastle over the previous 4 fixtures, they had managed to beat up against Everton by 2-0, brought Erling Haaland scoring a brace in that one. Lost to Aston Villa by 0-0, beat up against Bournemouth by 3-1, and subsequently Liverpool by 3-0. That was prior to the November international break. In sharp contrast, on the other side, Leeds have really been struggling over their last 5 fixtures. They have lost 4 out of the last 5, losing to Burnley by 2-0, beat up against West Ham by 2-1, then lost to Brighton by 3-0, lost to Nottingham Forest in a 3-1 defeat, and most recently they lost to Aston Villa by 2-1. So they are not looking good, and I do not think that Manchester City is the game for them, or is the perfect venue for them to bounce back. In any case, when you look over and surprisingly, over the 20 Premier League meetings that they have had between the two sides, Manchester City has won 8, Leeds have won 7, but that was back in the days when they were, still a big team. Within the realms of the Premier League, there's been 5 draws in between them. But when you look at the last 5, Leeds have beaten up against Manchester City only once, and that was by 2-1. And you have to go back in April 2021 when Leeds went away to the Etihad Stadium and beat them up by 2-1. Otherwise, all the others have been losses, including in the 2022-2023 season, where they were last in the Premier League. Manchester City beat them home and away by 2-1 at the Etihad Stadium, while they went to they went to Carl Road and no, is it Carl Road and Eland Road? Yes, and they went to Eland Road and beat up against Leeds by 3-1. When you wind things further back to the 2021-2022 Premier League season, Manchester City beat them by 4-0. That was away, while the home fixture, they won it by 7-0. So you can see that Leeds even struggle to score against Manchester City. In those 5 meetings, they've only scored 4 goals, So whereas they've beaten Manchester City at home before, and that should be a sign of encouragement, it's too further down the line that I do not think it will be inspiration enough for them to get over an angry Manchester City. Manchester City are going to behave like a beaten lion. They're going to behave like a lion whose cubs have been taken away from it. And that kind of feeling, that's the thing or the mentality with which I think they will be coming in this game. Pep Guardiola is going to drill that team for nothing other than victory, because they want to reduce that point gap between them and the table leaders, Arsenal. We know for a fact that Arsenal play on Sunday and they play against Chelsea. So what that implies is whatever the result comes out of that, for as long as Arsenal do not win, whether it's a draw or it's a loss for the Gunners, they now have a 7-point difference between them and Manchester City. So it's a huge opportunity for Manchester City to reduce on that gap. So, and they get to play earlier on Saturday. So it's the perfect timing. To sort of, put more pressure on that Arsenal side, to put more pressure on that Chelsea side, because if they do win, they will have leapfrogged Chelsea to move second on the Premier League log. So really, that's the significance of the game itself, in as far as the Premier League table is concerned. And then when you look at, I do not think they have so many injuries. Last I checked, it was only Niko Kovac. Last I checked, it was Mateo Kovacic and Rodrigo Cascante were doubtfuls for this particular game. So nonetheless, regardless of the lineup that they may choose to bring, which I do expect Gianluigi Donnarumma will be back in goal, having missed that UEFA Champions League game, I would go with Nico Gonzalez and Tijani Reinders in midfield alongside Phil Foden. I'll go with Jeremy Doku, Brad, Erling Haaland, and maybe who? A Bernardo Silva or a Savinho, whichever they may choose. But that backline, expect Ruben Dias to return to action. Expect Joshko Gvardiol to return. Expect maybe Matthias Nunes at right back and Nico O'Reilly at left back. So either way, I think Manchester City will win the game by 3-1. Yeah, I'm going 3-1 Manchester City for that weekend fixture. And then quickly, Sunderland are up against Bournemouth. We know that Sunderland are one of those teams that are defensively solid. They do not concede one too many goals. In fact, when you look at goals conceded this season, they have conceded one of the fewest with 11. Of course, Crystal Palace comes second with the fewest goals conceded with 9. Arsenal have only conceded 6. In between there, you have Manchester City, who have equally only conceded 10. So you can see that defensively, if you have a record of where you conceded only only 11 in 12, it's not too bad, a record. And Regis Libris, the manager for Sunderland, I think has done tremendously well. Their last Premier League outing was a 1-0 defeat to Fulham. That goal in the 84th minute by Raul Jimenez was all that decided the game for between Sunderland and Fulham on the day. Apologies, just checking out on something quickly. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. I don't know, for some reason I'd forgotten that. But it's critical to, making sure that people are getting the right feed or online there out. Anyways, quickly, still, like I was saying, when you look at Sunderland's form over the last 5 games, they've only lost 1 game. and that was against Fulham. They have 2 draws in between there against against Arsenal and against Everton. They have a loss. They beat up against Chelsea. They beat up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. In sharp contrast, Bournemouth have had sort of a stumble in form compared to how they started the season. They've gone to Crystal Palace 3-3. They beat up against Nottingham Forest by 2-0, lost to Man City by 3-1, lost to Aston Villa terribly by 4-0, and drew against West Ham by 2-2. And remember, they had to come from 2 goals down to draw against West Ham. So their form has not been really that good. And they travel to the Stadium of Light at Sunderland, where it's not been easy for any team that have asked. But previously, there's been only 4 meetings in as far as the Premier League is concerned between Sunderland and and AFC Bournemouth. And you will find that Bournemouth have won this fixture twice. Sunderland have won it once, and the other opportunity has been a draw. The 2 times that Bournemouth have gone to the Green Light Stadium in the Premier League, they've not lost. They've won once, they've drawn the other. While the reverse fixture at the Vitality Stadium, Sunderland have won one and lost the other. So, but those meetings date to as far back as 2017, 2016, and 2015 thereabout. So you can see how far back those go. Our circumstances in present day may have shifted because we're talking about Sunderland, who are 7th, Bournemouth at 8th. So that means the stakes couldn't be higher for the 2 sides in regards to tomorrow's fixture. They all are at 19 points. They've all won 5 games. They've all drawn 4 games. They've all lost 3 games. And I do not think tomorrow will be any different. I don't know. I'm inclined to think that Sunderland could bounce back to winning ways. But you see, when it comes to these teams that spiral into brilliant starts to the season, and they're believed to be either bottom table teams or mid-table teams, usually when they meet their peers, that's when they struggle the most, by the way. And that's why when you look at those statistics, you look at Sunderland went to Chelsea and beat them by 2-1. They went to Old Trafford and lost by 2-0. Forced Arsenal in a 2-2 draw. And by the way, quickly, Sunderland will be up against Liverpool. So very soon, they're going to have a difficult run of fixtures. But I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between these 2 sides. Nonetheless, if Sunderland do come out on top, I wouldn't be surprised either. But I'm going for a 1-1 draw between those 2 sides. And then quickly, Everton will be up against Newcastle at 8:30 p.m. East African time. And that will be on Saturday. Newcastle will be looking to bounce back from that defeat against Olympique Marseille in the UEFA Champions League. But we'll be hoping that their victory against Manchester City, that spirited fight that we did watch at St. James's Park, will be enough to motivate them against an Everton side who equally have everything to motivate them, having beaten up against Manchester United for the first time at Old Trafford under the charges of David Moyes, even though they were down to 10 men. So that in itself was really impressive. When you look over the last 5 fixtures in terms of recent form, Everton have not had it their way. They've lost to Man City, they've lost to Tottenham by 2-0 and 3-0 respectively. Really drew to against Sunderland in a 1-1 draw. Beat up against Fulham by 2-0, and most recently Man United by 1-0. What that meant is that they moved high on the Premier League table to 11th to go ahead of their arch nemesis in Liverpool. On the other side, Newcastle have struggled for their start in the season. In fact, had they lost against Manchester City, they could have easily slipped down closer to those relegation places as things do stand. In fact, they are 14th with only 15 points and are just 4 points adrift of the relegation zone. Everton is a duo. Newcastle during that run of spell, they've lost to Brighton and Hove Albion in a 2-1 defeat. They beat up against Fulham by a similar scoreline and lost to West Ham by 3-1, lost to Brentford by 3-1, and beat up against Manchester City. So that's the funny bit about football and the Premier League, not just the Premier League or any league whatsoever. Had you beat up against Manchester City, really losing to West Ham and Brentford, it doesn't really oftentimes make sense. But that's football. It is what it is. You get what you have. So the 2 sides are over the last 5 meetings. Everton have come out on top. You remember last season, I think this was the last game of the season for Newcastle at St James's Park. Everton went and beat them by 1-0, while the reverse fixture had ended in a goalless draw. When you read things further back at St James's Park, that was the 2024-2023 season, you'll find that Everton beat up against Newcastle at Goodison Park by 3-0, really forced them in a 1-1 draw when they went away. Now, the last time Newcastle went away to Everton and beat them was April 2023 when they went away to Everton and beat them by 4-1. Now, we're talking about a Newcastle side who, for some reason, have struggled through the Premier League, this season, contrary to what we had expected to happen. People that fought during the course of that game, that was Michael Keane and Idris Kanake, have already mended faces. I was watching a clip of them. Each of them was given one boxing glove to sort of try and replicate what had happened almost on the pitch at Old Trafford before Idris Kanagwe got sent off. I do not think that red card will be lifted. I do not know that for a fact that it is being lifted. So it looks like it will have to stay on the way it is. But they've mended fences. However, I do think Idris Kanagay will be a huge miss for that Everton side because he's one of the solid midfielders that they do have. Very, very athletic, very energetic, playing alongside James Garner in that midfield. But still, I think they will find possibly the right person to fill that void they are in to carry them on. I do not know whether O'Brien will be back for that game. Having been forced off through injury before the captain Seamus Coleman came on, James Tarkowski, Michael Keane in defense, Myakalenko. Do not forget they have Jared Braithwaite within their ranks, but I think that one is currently out through injury. That's Jared Braithwaite. Yes, he's out through a hamstring injury. Marlin Roll, Nathan Patterson, and Seamus Coleman has returned. Okay, we do have a comment from Okello David. Hi, Okello David. Thanks for the sports update, bro. Thank you to my brother. Kindly like the podcast while you're still with us. Do let me know what team do you support and where you're joining us from. But going by your name, I would assume that you're a fellow Ugandan, just like myself. But thank you so much for tuning into the broadcast. So, that Everton side had a very, very wonderful game. Keenan Dewsbury Hall, who scored the only goal of the game against Manchester United. Ilman Ndiaye had a very good game. James Garner in that midfield really, really had a wonderful game after the sending of his counterpart of Idris Kanagay. Jack Grealish put off quite a brilliant performance. Thornbury, yes, he did not score, but he had a very, very wonderful game. So, and then when you look at the bench, they still have Dwight McNeil, who I think is one of their potent players. Beto, Marcus Travers, like I said, Tyler Dibling. This one was signed from Southampton. Very, very, young prospect. That's the England international. Charlie Alcaraz. But let's wait and see who they bring in that midfield. On the side of Newcastle, I do not expect too many changes from the team that beat up against, Manchester City. That midfield trio of Sandro Tonali, Joelinton, and Bruno Guimaraes was impressive in that game. Could Dunban be returning? I think Dunban should be returning from his suspension following that red card that he did suffer away at Brentford. But nonetheless, should he still be absent, even in the wake of injuries to the likes of Kieran Trippier, you would hope that Seven Botman, Malik Theo, Tino Livramento, Tino Livramento has been out through injury, but Fabian Schär, Seven Botman, Malik Theo, who can chip in and give you the defensive solidity that you're looking for in that game. And I don't know what separates these two sides. They have always been mid-table teams, although Everton in recent years had slipped, really, really down until the return of the return of David Moyes. Everton have everything to play for, because if they do win their game, they have an opportunity to go as high as 5th on the Premier League log, waiting other results. And Newcastle will know that if they win this game, they could rise to 18 points, which brings them in the frame of positions closer to the likes of Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United, Everton, and Liverpool, who all have 18 points. So there's everything to play for. However, I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw in this one. Yep, I'm going to go for a 2-all draw in this one. I do not know. Something tells me it could end in a draw, and that's what I'm going to go for. But that's for the mid-late kickoff on Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Then in the very late kickoff will be Tottenham against Fulham. Fulham have been one of those inconsistent sides in as far as the Premier League is concerned this season, and their position on the league table at 15th is a clear indication of that. When you look at the last 5, they've only won 2 and lost 3. Realist Tottenham Hotspurs in their last 5 have done themselves no favors, losing 3 and winning just 1 and drawing 1. That's in as far as Tottenham Hotspurs have been concerned over the last 5. So they do not have it any better in as far as Tottenham are concerned. They went over last weekend. They were playing away to Arsenal. They got turned, got beat by 4-1. They went to the UEFA Champions League against PSG and got battered by 5-3. So, but at least they will take inspiration that they had a better performance against PSG than they had against Arsenal, and they scored 3 goals. Randall Colomwani picking up a brace in there, as well as Richarlison, scoring in back-to-back games for Tottenham Hotspurs. The game in itself, when you look at, like I said, when you look at the form table, Tottenham have lost to Aston Villa, they've lost to Chelsea, they've lost to Arsenal. Really, they drew to Man United and only beat up against Everton. Fulham on the other side lost to Arsenal, lost to Newcastle, beat up against Wolves, lost to Everton and beat up against Sunderland in their last league outing. So when it comes to form, in the last 5, in as far as the Premier League is concerned, none of them have it any better, really. One has collected 4 points out of the possible 15. Another has collected 6 out of the possible 15. That is still a poor report card. Then, when you go to the last 5 head-to-head meetings between the two sides, Fulham did beat up against Tottenham Hotspurs by 2-0 last season at the Craven Cottage, while the reverse fixture had ended in a 1-all draw. This time around, we're going to be at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Does that make any difference? I'm not inclined to believe so, but we will know for a fact that when you wind things back to the 2023-2024 campaign, still Fulham beat up against Tottenham Hotspur by 3-0 at Craven Cottage. Really lost the earlier fixture by 2-0. And Fulham got beat by Tottenham in January 2023 at Craven Cottage by 0-0. Now, we're talking about a different Tottenham, one under Ange Postecoglou from last season and one that is under Thomas Frank this season. Again, this season, they've been inconsistent with their performances and results. That shows, again, on their standings on the Premier League table. Yes, they are not so far off at the top 4 in as far as points, because when you're at 19 points, they have 18 points, and they are only 3 points off the top 4. That's Aston Villa in 4th place. If they can win this game, they climb up to, within those very ranks, because they do have a very sort of, okay, not a very healthy goal difference, but I'm thinking, given how Fulham have struggled through games in recent times, it's a London derby again. You do not know what kind of Tottenham is going to show up. They've struggled with injuries. They have had so many injuries in recent times to players like, of course, James Maddison, Dejan Kulusevski, Radu Dragosin, Kota Takai, Yves Bissouma, Dominic Solanke. They've welcomed some back, the likes of Lucas Barkville, but when you have Pape Matsai in that midfield, when you have Joao Paulinho, a former Fulham player himself, Rodrigo Bentancur, that gives you a fighting chance. I would say start Randall Colomwani, let him use that inspiration of the Brest squad in midweek to get you some goals in the Premier League. Richarlison, let him start on the wings with Muhammad Kudus, but that means you get to sacrifice Brennan Johnson. That back 4 shouldn't be a back 3 like they had started out cowardly against Arsenal. Let's see Christian Romero, Mickey Van de Ven, Destin Udogie, and Pedro Porro or at Dejad space, then Guillermo Vicario in goal. Then on the side of Fulham, Raul Jimenez, they've just been inconsistent overall at Fulham, and they do not have so many injuries, but those that are out injured are significant players in Andy Robinson and Rodrigo Muniz. when you look at the likes of Stanisic in that midfield for Fulham, on a given day, they can put up a good fight. They can't give you a good game. They've just been inconsistent this season. They've just been inconsistent this season, and how they battled it against Sunderland was no easy task. Might I add? It was no easy task. Ryan Sessegnon, Calvin Bassey, and Joachim Anderson in that centre back pairing with Kevin. Tete, Bernard Lennon goal, Iwobi in that midfield alongside Sander Badge, Joshua King, Wilson. It's called Wilson what? I'm forgetting his other name, Wilson something. But, they can't give you a good game. But I think Tottenham will eventually edge this one by 2-1. I'm going to think that Thomas Frank is going to win this game. I do not know. It will be difficult, but I think he will come out on top with a 2-1 victory. So that wraps up what's to come on Saturday in as far as the Premier League is concerned. Now, let's head into what will be coming on Sunday. As you've seen, we've gone through those games in a chronological order without omitting any game whatsoever. So for the big game, that's the Arsenal versus Chelsea game, I'm thinking we could do its solid preview in full breadth in our night broadcast. Remember, we do come to you live every single morning, Monday to Friday, at 9 a.m. Sometimes we're a bit late and we do come at 10, but at least that's our routine, Monday to Friday. And then on Saturday, we come at 11 a.m. East African time. That's in the morning. And then every single night at 11 p.m., we do come to you live. But on Fridays, we do come between 9 and 10. Yes, on Fridays, particularly for the night broadcast. And then we do it again on Saturday. On Sunday, we are live at 11 p.m. On Sunday, we have no morning broadcast. So I take note of that. So thank you so much for our regulars, people. So going into Sunday action, we'll start off with the early kickoff that will be at Selhurst Park between Man United and Crystal Palace. The game comes at a period when Manchester United have slipped out of form. They had put on a good run. They had, I think they had been unbeaten in about 6 league games. Winning 4 games. During which they beat up against Chelsea, they beat up against Liverpool, they beat up against Brighton, and then they slipped out of form. That started with a 2-2 draw against Nottingham Forest, a 2-2 draw against Tottenham Hotspur until they lost to Everton in spectacular fashion by 0-0. The reason as why I say that is because Everton were down to 10 men for majority of that game. Idris Gana Gueye got his red card in the 13th minute of that game. And Crystal Palace on the other side. By the way, Crystal Palace is one of the teams that are really, really hard to beat this season. They've only lost 2 games. One of those losses coming against Arsenal, losing by 0-0. They've drawn a good number of games, or a good chunk of games, but out of the last 5, they've won 2, they've drawn 2, So they're not so far off or better off than Manchester United in terms of recent form. All have lost 1. So that's the significance of that. But Crystal Palace, are high up on the table in 5th place. Yes, they are going to come into this game seeking to recover from their defeat against Strasbourg in the UEFA Conference League last night. They lost. I think Tyrick Mitchell scored for them that goal that turned out to be a mere consolation, while Emmanuel Emega had been on target for Strasbourg for the equalizer. I do not know. I think it was. I do not remember. Was it Maurabit who scored the winning goal? That came in the 77th minute. So they'll be looking to bounce back from that defeat in the UEFA Conference League, where they've lost now 2 games because they also lost against Lanaka, yes, by 0-0. So, meanwhile, Manchester United have been well rested. Of course, they do hang their heads in shame, given how they lost to Everton. And it's not because they did not create chances. They created chances. Jordan Pickford simply decided to give us a man of the match kind of performance with 6 brilliant saves. United were not as clinical. He saved 2 headers from Joshua Zirkzee. There's that shot towards the tail end of the first half from Bruno Fernandes that he saves. There was an attempt by, I think, Brani Mbumo. They really came close to finding the equalizer, but they were not clinical enough on the day. I think the game comes a little too early for the likes of Benjamin Sesko, but we know that Lisandro Martinez did return from that anterior cruciate ligament injury, even though it is yet to feature for this Man United side. Maguire had been out through injury. We know that Ruben Amorim likes to, chop his defense whenever it pleases him. He's one of those guys that likes to tinker with his backline. Today you'll see Leny Yoro, Matas Delit, and Luke Shaw. Tomorrow it will be Leny Yoro, Maguire, and Matas Delit. Tomorrow it will be Leny Yoro. It will be Nosa Mazoroi being brought in centre back, and then before you know it, so really, he tried to be attack minded in that game, but that's after halftime when he went to Nosa Mazoroi for for Amadou Diallo. Excuse me. I don't know. I feel like I'm catching a cold, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. Anyways, like I was saying, so the fixture in itself, United for me have no excuses, and because when I was predicting my sort of season table, how it will finish, of course we're still only 12 games in, and we're going in for match day 13. My prediction was that Man United would finish 7th on the log. And the reason as why I put them that high is not because I had so much confidence in Ruben Amorim and his capabilities, but I looked on the fact that they were going to have one game a week. For as long as there is no midweek football in the Premier League, they were bound to have one game a week. Of course, next week, midweek, all teams have games for match day 14 of the Premier League. As we look to close down the halfway mark of the season by the end of December. So I looked at that and I said it's going to be a huge advantage. First of all, he has a broad squad. When you look at all the composition of players that they have, from Tom Heaton in goal, Altay Bayindia, Sene Lomans, who is now the regular starter. When you come to their defense, Aiden Heaven, Harry Maguire, Lisandro Martinez, Matas Delit, Nosa Mazoroi, Patrick Dogu, Amadou Diallo, Luke Shaw. All those are defenders that they have at their disposal. When you go to their midfield, Kobbie Mainoo, Manuel Ugarte, Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, Mason Mount, Matas Cunha, Brani Mbumo, Amadou Diallo. I've combined the midfielders and the attacking midfielders are wingers. There are about Joshua Zirkzee, Benjamin Sesko. They have a forgotten Chido Martin Obi. Now, I do not know the full story to this, but I've never understood why a player like Chido Martin Obi left Arsenal to join Manchester United. Because when you look around the block, yes, Manchester United do give youngsters a chance. We saw Medjbury. We saw Marcus Rashford came through the ranks of the academy. But how many of those do come out through the ranks of the academy at Manchester United and get a comfortable starting slot within Man United? Of course, Kobbie Mainoo, but we know how he's fallen down the pecking order in recent days. Mamelodi Sundowns is being, let me get that correctly, is being Moukoko. That's Sonoff Soweto buying. Oh, Manchester United is buying Moukoko. Sorry, Mamelodi Sundowns is buying Moukoko. Okay, that would be an impressive addition. I'd want to believe that Soweto is from South Africa. I do not think this is Soweto's first time on our channel, only that it's been ages since he last was here. Greetings to you from Uganda to South Africans. We've not seen our friend, what's his name? Prince Nkosi from South Africa. He's, I think, a Mamelodi Sundowns fan. He's also an Arsenal fan from down South Africa. It's been ages, my brother. Indeed. I do remember the name, but I know it's been a while since you were last year or the last saw you on the broadcast. But it's a pleasure to have you back once again. I kind of like the broadcast, but thank you so much for managing to catch a minute and you reunite with us. So I looked at Man United in that context. To say you have all this time to have players well rested throughout the course of the week. You have all the ample time to review your what has gone right, what has not gone wrong. You have all the time to improve on what is not gone right, and yet they seem to struggle with that. Nonetheless, they seem to struggle with that. Soweto says, I'm one who says that we should not be watching European football. I understand that completely, Soweto. But from the market in which I do serve, and that's the Ugandan market, you'll find that as much as people appreciate our domestic league, which went through its own wave of troubles prior to the start of the season with what had been introduced as a new league format before it was reverted back to the old league format, the round robin. Majority of our fans will prefer European football to a domestic football. And what's your opinion on the Congolese national team? I think they're a very, very decent team. I have a lot of respect and trust in the manager, in Sebastian Desabre. Having managed the Uganda Cranes team, that was guiding them to the qualification of the 2019 AFCON that was played in Egypt. He saw us advance from the group stage for the first time since 1978. We went to the round of 16 where we lost to Senegal by 1-0. And eventually we lost him to Pyramids, where he went to manage. He took Abdul Rumala to Pyramids. Things did not work out quickly. He part ways with them and he's been around. But I think he has an appreciation for African football. He understands it tactically and technically. He just knows how to organize his team so well, and they can't beat up against any side when it comes to the African continent. They do not concede too many goals, so I do appreciate him as one of those tactical managers that I've seen within the African game. He does remind me of Hervé Renard when I think he was guiding, was it Zambia to the triumph of the AFCON 2012? Was it 2012? Yeah. 2012, yes. So really, that's how I look at him. Really, but thanks for your question on that. But yeah, I have a great appreciation for Sebastian Desabre, and I'm one of his biggest fans, really. But thank you for that submission on there. So for those of you that mind that we drifted off a little bit to African football, when you say technically and tactically, what's the difference between Africa, Europe, and South American football? I think when it comes to a majority of African teams, and this is separated within the different regions of the continent. When you go to Northern Africa, teams from Northern Africa like to be dominant on the ball. They knock it around, pass it around in sort of similar ways, the way you see a Spain play. When you go to West Africa, those teams are more combative. They use their physicality, they use their defensive prowesses, and get you on the counter-attack. They're very good in set pieces. When you go to a team like South Africa, they like to play expansive football. They want to be passive. They have good players, only that it doesn't often click for that South African national team, even when they have very good players. When you come to the side of East Africa, again, we are a bit combative. We are conservative in the way we play. So like that. That's how sort of football is segmented across the continent. Now, when you go over to Europe, most of the teams want to dominate the game. Whether it's Germany, whether it's France, whether it's Spain, whether it's England, that's how they go about the game. Physically, you could be better than them, but when it comes to organizing their team tactically, Usually that's when they get the better of you. When it comes to their individual talents, that's when the technical abilities of those respective players that they will field is where they get the better of you. As much as we love our own players down on the Black Man's continent, we know that you'll notice it with the respective national teams that when they are summoning players, majority of the players that they are summoning are players that are playing in Europe because they believe they are more exposed. They're facing some of these guys on a regular basis. We know that even when they are scouting for their national teams, they look for the players that are born in those countries, whether it's France, whether it's Spain, that are born in those countries, whether it's in Portugal, but have their roots, their parents have roots within Africa, and that kind of thing. The same way you've looked at the composition of the French national team. Majority of their players have roots in Africa and things like that. So, and then players that have been propped up within those European academies, because we do appreciate for a fact that their football, in terms of development, in terms of progression, is at a different level compared to our very own here. We may get the better of them once in a while here and there in a game or two. For example, like we saw Senegal beat up against England in a friendly. Overall, we know that they are better than us. They are better than us. So really, then when it comes to South America, although it hasn't exhibited itself as much in recent years, for them, it's about that natural talent, the rawness. When you go to the Brazil national team, they've always been predominantly been known for a country that keeps on producing talent after talent. It's about the individual talent that then combines into a team to get the best, out of the collective. For example, over the years, whether it was Ronaldo Nazario Darima, Ronaldinho, Cafu, Roberto Carlos, that Brazil team that won the World Cup in 2002. When you look at Neymar Santos Jr., of course, I for one believe that over the last, over the last 5 years, Brazil has not. Apologies for that internet glitch. Apologies for that internet glitch. These things have happened, unfortunately, more often than we would love to during the course of this week, but it's good we are back. So like I was saying, the likes of Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo Goes, Richarlison, Bruno Guimaraes, Jolinton, they're not the finest of players skillfully. Rodrigo Goes has the skill, and so does Vinicius Jr., but they've not lived to the hype. Gabriel Martinelli. So Brazil has sort of fallen off, in my opinion. Argentina have had it really, really well. I think over the last 10 years, they've had the better talent across board. Of course, Lionel Messi, Angelo Di Maria. You look at Enzo Fernandez, present day. There's a time they've had Lautaro Martinez, they had Gonzalo Higuain, they had Mauro Icardi. They were literally spoiled for choice, they produce talent after talent, at that Argentine national team. And it's no surprise that they won the previous World Cup in 2022 in Qatar. So really, then when you look at Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile, some of the other teams from South America, they've not lived to the billing. I think Uruguay, ever since they went out of that phase of Luis Suarez, Diego Forlan Colanzo, Edson Cavani, they've not been the same team, really. They've struggled to be that same team, relying on the likes of Fede Valverde, Lucas Torreira, so Darwin Núñez, they've not lived to the hype. So those are the differences that I look to in terms of Africa, Europe, and South America. But South America, that's where you get good talent. Now, present day, I'll use the words of Arsene Wenger. He said, if you want to build a good team, for defensive players, go to South America. For midfielders, go to Spain. For attackers, go to France. He summarized it that way. Anyways, thank you so much, Soweto, for, even though you diverted us from what our main course was, but we always appreciate it when people bring different dimensions to our debate and expand on our topics and debates. So thank you so much for that. Anyways, allow me retreat back to the Premier League where we are discussing Crystal Palace versus Manchester United. For me, Man United can do better, really. When you look at when you look at Ruben Amorim's tenure at Manchester United, because he did mark 1 year in charge. That was on the 25th of November as they lost to Everton. He was celebrating 1 year in charge of Manchester United, and he's managed them through 34 Premier League games, and they've won only 9. They've drawn 7 and have 18 losses. Now, that's a very, very poor record, to say the least, for a team the caliber of Manchester United by their own standards. That's really, really, really poor. Really, really poor. It's no surprise that they finished 15th last season. And even the 15th itself was a little bit flattery because Tottenham decided to slip further down in 17th and, Wolves in between there, But these two sides, of course, Man United have the lion's share over the victories over Crystal Palace with 19, over 6 in the last 32 Premier League meetings with 7 draws. So you can see those are not a very common thing, even though last season there was one at Selhurst Park that ended in a goalless draw. Really, Crystal Palace went away to Man United, beat them by 2-0 when it came to the reverse fixture in February. When you go back to last season, but one, Crystal Palace beat up against Man United by home and away, 4-0 and 1-0. And respectively, that was last season back one. Then when you want things further back in February 2023, that's when you'll find a 2-1 victory for Erik ten Hag over Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace do play with a similar shape or system or style as Man United. It's just that Crystal Palace have been more effective in the implementation of that system. They play with, the 3-4-2-1 kind of system. In this particular case, Man United having to rely on Joshua Zirkzee. But I think with the return of Matthias Cunha, if he does return indeed from that knock he had suffered, that's why he missed the game against Everton, then he probably could be started up front at the expense of Joshua Zirkzee, who I believe deserves to play in that team. Really, because of his hold-up play, he's capable of taking on players. I know he enjoys the game in terms of being with the ball and dribbling past players than really more of being just sitting in and around the box waiting to score. Really, so. And then I do not know why isn't Kobbie Mainoo afforded playing time. I don't just believe. I know for a fact that there's a good player in there. When England went to the Euros 2024, in which they reached the finals, Kobbie Mainoo was a huge factor in that team. And suddenly United are telling us they can't afford him a playing slot. It's not like Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes have been flawless. That's not the case. That's not the case. In any case, I think it is Bruno Fernandes who, by the way, concedes possession before Everton go on to score through Keenan Dewsbury Hall in their last defeat. So Crystal Palace are well-drilled side. Part of their inefficiencies so far this season have been trying to find the balance between their responsibilities in Europe and back home domestically. It's sort of a new phase for them. It's the first time they're being in Europe, and it's bound to create them all sorts of troubles. So, and like I said, United well rested. You'd think they have the advantage. Crystal Palace being at home, it's not going to be an easy game. Their fans will be behind them. But like I said, Oliver Glasner knows that system one too well of playing with, the 10s, 2 number 10s. These days they play with Ismail Sarr and Yeremy Pino, with Joan Felipe Mateta leading the lines. That midfield of Adam Wharton and Taichi Kamada. Then you have Tyrick Mitchell as a wing back alongside Daniel Nunes, because in the back line you have McKay, you have Christian Richards. What's the other guy's name? I'm forgetting. Of course, with Dean Henderson in goal. It's a very, very decent team. If you do meet that team on a good day, they're going to beat you. I don't know. I'm not confident about Manchester United winning this game. I'm not too confident about Crystal Palace winning this game. And I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. That's what I'm going to go with in terms of my prediction. But we'll wait and see. Then Aston Villa, at 5 minutes past 5 p.m. will be up against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolverhampton Wanderers have struggled this season. They only have 2 draws. They've lost 10 games. Aston Villa have formed to their side. They're in good spirits. They're as high as 4th on the Premier League log. They want to improve on that. They are 21 points. They know that they are 8 points adrift from the Arsenal, who they get to play next weekend. I think down the line, yes, next weekend, because midweek Arsenal will be playing against Brentford. So it's a huge opportunity for them to further close down the gap on Arsenal, hoping that Arsenal could fall against Chelsea. I do not think if you're Aston Villa in a home game, it's a time to lose to Wolverhampton Wanderers. So that's, I think, they will thump Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think they'll beat Rob Edwards' side. I do not think this is the game you ask Rob Edwards to change their fortunes, really. So when you look at the last 5, they're one of the most informed teams. Aston Villa, they've won 4 of the last 5, really only losing to Liverpool by 2-0. India, they've beaten up against giants like Tottenham. They've beaten up against Man City. They've also thumped Bournemouth and Leeds United. On the other side, Wolves have lost all their last 5 games. So this won't be any different. I know that Wolves beat up against Aston Villa by 2-0 at Molineux last season. Really, Aston Villa won the fixture by 3-1 when they met at Villa Park. When you go back to the previous season, there was a 2-0 victory for Aston Villa, really a 1-1 draw at Molineux. So Aston Villa struggle when they go away to Wolverhampton Wanderers, but they do dominate the encounter when they're at Villa Park. That's why I'm going to go with the 4-1 victory for Aston Villa in that game. Then quickly, Nottingham Forest up against Brighton and Hove Albion. Nottingham Forest are in very, very good spirits following their victory last evening in the UEFA Europa League. They were in action and they beat up against Malamo by 3-0. Really, they beat up against Liverpool the previous weekend, so they are really, really in high spirits. Sean Dyche is gotten them bowling. They will take that confidence with them in tomorrow's game, and knowing that they've managed to register 2 consecutive victories in the Premier League and a draw. So that's 7 points out of the possible 9. Of course, prior to that, they lost to Chelsea and Bournemouth, respectively. Then also the inspiration from the UEFA Europa League, where they've won 2 consecutive fixtures against FC Porto and now Malamo. When you look at Brighton, facing with Brighton, they did humiliate Brighton last season, beating them by 7-0 when they met at the City Stadium, while the reverse fixture had ended in a 2-2 draw. I do not anticipate a draw here, but Morgan Gibbs-White was one of the goal scorers in that game. Chris Wood scored a hat-trick in that game. They won by 7-0. Williams, Silva, and unknown goal from Lewis Dunk. Brighton, Fabian Hasler will be looking to correct that mistake. I do not think they're going to get beat by 7-0, but I think Nottingham Forest will edge the fixture by 2-0. Then Liverpool will be playing away to West Ham United. That will be still on Sunday at the same kickoff time. We know Liverpool struggles. We know there are issues with injuries, although I've been reading that Giovanni Leoni is set to return in January, despite suffering an anterior cruciate ligament injury on his knee. So he's a youngster. They tend to recover faster, so I'm not really surprised with that. But I also think that they shouldn't be looking to, to rush him. Hugo Ekitike suffered a back injury. Conor Bradley and Florian Wirtz have been out ever since the international break. Jayden Dance, Stevan Bajcetic all have hamstring injuries. Jeremy Frimpong with a hamstring injury. Hugo Ekitike, I mentioned that one. Alson Ramsey-Specker missed the UEFA Champions League tie through an illness. Some of these could be back, particularly Alson Ramsey-Specker, possibly maybe Florian Wirtz and Conor Bradley. Maybe Florian Wirtz, because Conor Bradley, they said it could be 3 weeks. But Florian Wirtz could be back. Hi LFC, good to have you back on the broadcast. You do join us at the time when we are discussing that Liverpool game against West Ham United. There's nothing Liverpool have done in the last 5 fixtures to convince us that they are capable of winning this game. They've lost 4 out of the last 5. They've only beaten up against Aston Villa. Really, West Ham have been trying to build themselves some momentum, winning 2 of the last 3. That's against Newcastle and Burnley. Really, their last game was a 2-2 draw against Bournemouth. They conceded a 2-0 lead in that game, so they will be displeased with themselves. But I think they've been building some bit of momentum for themselves in the last 5 in terms of form. Of course, prior to those 3 games, they had lost to Brentford, they had lost to Leeds. So then, when it comes to the fixture itself, of course, Liverpool have dominated this fixture. Last season, they beat up against West Ham home and away by 2-1 and by 5-0 when they visited West Ham. Over the last 5 fixtures, Liverpool have won 4. There's only been 1 draw, which was a 2-2 draw. That was last season, but 1. This Liverpool team, a draw between them and West Ham wouldn't be surprising, even a defeat. But remember, during the course of this week, I was saying I should forbid myself or take a break from predicting Liverpool games, because every time I predicted them to win, they've gone on to lose. They lost to PSV Eindhoven quite terribly, losing by 4-1. They lost to Nottingham Forest by 3-0. Could have been 4. I mean, I've been watching a clip for how Liverpool conceded those goals, and it speaks. I mean, what was Virgil van Dijk doing? I mean, that's as deliberate as the handball comes. Somebody was saying that this team want the manager sacked, and they did everything to that effect. When you see Curtis Jones lose possession, how he doesn't track back, Ibrahim Konate's defending was horrendous. They just can't defend. Their attack is toothless. Isak is struggling. I do not know. They could get beat by West Ham by 2-1. But we know that this week there was a crisis meeting for Liverpool, from which we do learn that apparently he's been given 2 games. That's the game against West Ham United, and then the subsequent game against Sunderland. Although some argue that it could be 4 games, and up until through Leeds and Brighton, which will come on the 13th of December, before he could be shown the exit. But like I said, nothing Liverpool have done in the last 5 fixtures, in the last 10 fixtures, that could convince us that they're capable of beating up against West Ham. Nothing, absolutely nothing. They have lost 6 Premier League games and won 6. They do not draw games. Once they're getting beat, they get beat. They can't even force a draw. So this one is a bit of a hard one for me to predict. But I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham win it by 2-1. I've lost trust and confidence in Liverpool. Anytime they could bounce back. But for now, I've lost my confidence in them. And then, of course, the late kickoff on Sunday at 7:30 p.m. will be between Arsenal and Chelsea. Guys, why don't we do the preview of the Arsenal game as an exclusive in tonight's broadcast? Yep. Let's do that. So allow me to wrap it here and say thank you to every single one of you that has been part of the broadcast. LFC, Soweto, Okello, David, and every single one of you that has made it to this broadcast. Thank you so much for having been part of it. I do appreciate you a great deal. We'll look to do this again later tonight at 9 p.m. So that's when we'll preview that Arsenal game against Chelsea. So yeah, allow me to wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Catch you later in the evening for that preview of the Chelsea versus Arsenal game. That will be done in exclusivity, for what's to come in as far as that game is concerned. Then maybe before I let you go, do not forget there's action tonight. In the Spanish La Liga, Getafe will be up against Elche at 11 p.m. In German, Borussia Mönchengladbach will be up against RB Leipzig at 10:30. And then In the Italian Serie A, Como will be up against Sassuolo at 10:45, while in League One, Metis will be up against Stade Reims at the same kickoff time. So do not miss out on those fixtures. Tonight, let's preview that Chelsea Arsenal game. Let's look at what else there is to come all around Europe. That's in the Spanish La Liga, in the German Bundesliga, in the Italian Serie A, and the French League One. In as far as things are concerned. So have yourselves a blessed day and a wonderful weekend ahead. Bye bye for now. It's been a pleasure for me.